Hey, what's going on? It's at the letters for Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. Arden Swelling and Ben Nicholson Smith, our producers, are Nick Andrade and Christian Ryan. You can reach us at the letters at sportsnet.ca. You can listen to ATL wherever you get your podcasts. You can check us out on YouTube. You can check us out on sportsnet.ca. Ben, plenty to talk about, and it actually is just dawning on me right in this very moment that recording a podcast at 9:05 a.m. on the final day of spring training may come back to bite us. And there may actually, I could pretty much guarantee there's going to be some sort of news that's going to come out later today that we're not going to get to. So tell me what you have your eye on then, because it is the final day of spring training and the Blue Jays will be boarding a charter for Toronto this evening. What do you got your eye on down there on your final day at spring?
Yeah, well, I'm glad we didn't record yesterday morning, because if we had, then we would have been talking
Right.
about Greg Bird again as a kind of lock for this team. We would have been definitely not talking about Gosuke Katoh. I'm pretty sure that he might have been like a mention in passing at most. Now Katoh is on the team, Greg Bird is not. So yeah, I think, as the final day of spring here gets going, I'm honestly expecting it to be pretty quiet, which maybe tells you that, I should brace myself for the unexpected here. But I think, you're looking at a start from Alek Manoah. You're looking at a couple at-bats from the regulars. The Blue Jays don't technically have to set their roster until Thursday at noon. It looks like Zack Collins will be on the roster. So, they've still got some moving pieces, and they've still got some decisions to make here, especially with the bullpen. But at this point, I am kind of expecting a quiet final day of spring.
It is interesting, though, because it's like the AAA season starts today in a matter of hours. Like Buffalo has a game in less than 4 hours. So do you have like an understanding of how the Blue Jays have sort of managed that? Did they obviously they sent a bunch of guys out to Buffalo beforehand, and the Bison sort of released this partial roster the other day. Like, are more players going over there? There's some guys who are going to be in AA but are going to, fill out that AAA roster the first couple of days of the season. Like, how's that all working?
Good question. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how how full that AAA roster is. Nick Allgaier, the opening day starter, maybe they'll call on him to kind of haul some innings for the Bisons. They'll have enough arms to get by for the initial period of the season, and then from there you kind of add on, because I guess with some of the bullpen decisions, those guys wouldn't be candidates to go to AAA. Like, for example, Ryan Borucki and Nate Pearson. Pearson's not going to break with the team. Borucki probably won't, but they wouldn't go to Buffalo. They'd be on the injured list anyway. So they probably stay with the Jays or stay back in Florida. And so that would account for at least some of the decisions. But certainly a guy like Taylor Saucedo, if he's not with the Jays, you'd figure he'd be in Buffalo.
Yeah, so maybe we'll learn some things, and we can kind of reverse engineer some Blue Jays roster construction later today when we see like who is and is not in Buffalo. Gosuke Katoh is not going to be in Buffalo, and as you mentioned, I mean, coming into this week, I was like, Gosuke Katoh is going to be a Buffalo Bison. I at no point, and this is a failing on my part, at no point considered him when I was projecting the Toronto Blue Jays roster. I just really didn't see him making it, and he has, and it's like quite a story. You wrote it at sportsnet.ca. Would encourage everybody to go read that. I mean, long-time minor leaguer, a former guy with a bunch of prospect shine on him, left-handed bat, versatile defender, gives you a pretty good plate appearance, it seems. I'm not going to profess to have watched him in the Yankees or Padres system, but pretty impressive minor league on base numbers, and looks like he can draw a walk. Obviously not a ton of pop there, not a guy who's really going to drive the ball, but like, what are you expecting from him on this Blue Jays roster? Because it is a little bit of a surprise that he's going to be announced at Rogers Center on Friday night.
Oh yeah, it was a surprise to everyone, I think, including him. It was a really cool moment on Monday. He was sitting in the Blue Jays visiting clubhouse in Lakeland, and Charlie Montoyo comes up to him and says, "Congrats." And he was like, "You're messing with me." He's like, "There's no way." And Montoyo said, "No, congrats. You're on the team." And so at that point, he realized this is a guy who's in his 10th professional season. He realized that he had made it. And this is someone who was close to quitting in 2014 and 15 when he had abysmal numbers in low A, and he stuck with it. So it was really, really cool moment to see that. He talked to me and Arash outside the Jays clubhouse there, and yeah, he was like overwhelmed, totally overwhelmed, and just witnessing like the coolest moment of someone's life. It's very cool to see that. And then yeah, like you said, like he's a good ball player. The reason I thought they were going to go with Bird is because Katoh really doesn't have power, so you're talking about someone who, yeah, he's a good player. He brings some versatility. He can play different infield and outfield spots, but he's not someone who really brings a lot of pop. And I thought the Jays wanted pop off the bench, but maybe they get that in Collins. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
Totally. It is related to Zack Collins. It is related to Greg Bird. So I don't know and we'll talk about those things as well. But like with Katoh, I should say, Gosuke, as they were calling him around the batting cage when I was down there, which is a great nickname that I hope sticks for as long as he's on this roster. I mean, I think the idea is he covers so many defensive positions, right? You can stick him in an outfield corner. He plays the infield. He's going to make the plays that come to him. I don't know that he's going to be a spectacular 5-star defender anywhere, but like he's going to give you reliable defense. So he's an option late in games. He gives you flexibility and versatility if you're Charlie Montoyo and you're pinch hitting for certain guys, or you're trying to kind of like fit guys around the diamond and thinking about your defensive lineup. Like it does give you more flexibility that way. And like the plate appearance that he gives you, and we haven't seen him at the big league level, but just based on his AAA track record, it seems like it is a disciplined one and a discerning one, like a selective plate appearance, which is what you would ask. And like I don't know if we set the over under for Gosuke Katoh plate appearances in the month of April, like I don't know if you might want to put that number like 14.5 or something, right? Like it's it's not going to be
15.
a high number.
Yeah.
50, yeah, right. So I don't know that he's going to be at the plate that much, but if he has to be, he's not going to drive the ball or strike it with a bunch of authority, but it seems like he will see 4 or 5 pitches when he can, and he will make the pitcher work, and he won't be an easy out. So I do think those are probably, I'm speculating, those are two of the things that the Blue Jays liked and why he's coming north.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like even, for a team that already has Tapia, he's kind of a left-handed hitting guy who doesn't bring a lot of power. So now the bench has 3 left-handed hitters suddenly, and assuming that Collins makes the team, which that assumption might be proven wrong, but Collins, lefty bat, Tapia, and Katoh. So you've got these 3 guys. None of them are really proven. It would be better to have Kyle Schwarber than this kind of mixed platter of outfielders and bench players. That's okay. I mean, Tapia is certainly useful. Katoh, we'll see. Collins, we'll see. But defensively, Katoh does give you some things, and he brings you a little bit more versatility than a Greg Bird would have. And as for first base, Katoh's played a little bit there, but it probably puts Biggio a bit more in that first base mix for the Jays.
So let me pitch you on my theory here. Here's my take on Zack Collins, Gosuke Katoh, Reese McGuire, Greg Bird, how this all kind of fits together. So the Blue Jays trade Zack Collins, or they trade Reese McGuire, for Zack Collins the other night. Reese McGuire, left-handed hitting backup catcher. Zack Collins, the White Sox, left-handed hitting backup catcher. There were parallels to almost to the Grichuk for Tapia trade, right? Which was outfielder for outfielder. This was catcher for catcher, somewhat similar. But what I actually think that Collins replaces is not just Reese McGuire. I think Zack Collins is Reese McGuire and Greg Bird in one, while only taking one roster spot. What I mean by that is like he is a left-handed power bat off the bench who can draw a walk and who can hit big league pitching with really high exit velocities. So that is how he replaces Greg Bird. He's also a guy who can play catcher. So that's how he replaces Reese McGuire. So I think the Blue Jays just sort of like add a guy who does everything that McGuire and Bird were going to do for you, but he only takes up one roster spot. Now, obviously, there's a downgrade defensively there. Zack Collins not a strong defender behind the plate. Reese McGuire's a better defender. But Collins, who has the ability to play first base, played it for a bunch of games in AAA coming up, has played it very sparingly, but has played it at the big league level. He can play first. He can play behind the plate, left-handed power bat, disciplined off the bench. I think he's Bird and McGuire in one. I think that's the idea here.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair read. I mean, you look at Collins, like just offensively, he's really different than McGuire. And I didn't realize this at first because I wasn't overly familiar with Zack Collins' profile. But you start looking at it, and he has higher max exit velocities than Reese McGuire, higher average exit velocities, better barrel rates. Like the results have not been good at the major league level. He's got, I think, a 645 OPS, something like that. But at AAA, he's hit, and the underlying major league numbers are good. So you're looking at someone who, I think it's pretty fair to think that Collins could be at least a league average bat. And that's not what we would say about Reese McGuire at all. And he has an option. So he's probably going to break with the team. But if he doesn't, or if they want to trim down the roster on May 1st, then they can option him and keep him, which you couldn't have done with Reese McGuire. So, that's more flexibility, more power. And then you get a defensive downgrade. So, McGuire defensively, he was a good defender. And he just wasn't going to give you as much offense. But what this does is it really puts Alejandro Kirk in more of an important defensive spot, where instead of being a third catcher DH, Alejandro Kirk now is someone who's really important to this team defensively.
And then by condensing Bird/McGuire into one roster spot, you open up another one where you can carry a guy like Gosuke Katoh, and now you do have somebody who's a versatile defender, and you can, I just think the Blue Jays got more flexible and more versatile. Like, it's like Richard Fatapia. Like, I don't know that the Blue Jays got better in that trade. I don't know that they got quote unquote better in McGuire for Collins, but I think they got more versatile and more flexible. And I think that their roster makes more sense and is kind of more harmonious and everything's more complementary. I think that's kind of the idea behind both of those sort of edge of the roster plays.
Yeah, it gives them kind of an interesting bench. And for a while, there was that uncertainty as to how it was going to play out. Now we have a pretty good idea as to what that's going to look like. And the bench now has some different ways that you can use it, with the multi-positions, with three lefty hitters potentially on the bench. So it gives them a different look. I think too, I was thinking, like, who else would have been a candidate, right? Like, let's say they hadn't gone with Katoh, probably Nathan Lucas would have been next. So it does to me underscore a little bit that they have an amazing position player core. It's the core of this team. It's the reason that they enter the season as one of the best teams in baseball. But beyond that, it's like there's not necessarily, in the absence of a Moreno who's pushing or a Martinez who's, potentially coming close, there's not really someone who's on the cusp right now as far as prospects. And that's what opens the door for someone like a Katoh.
Let me double back to what you said earlier. Would you rate Alejandro Kirk as a better defensive catcher than Zack Collins?
Yeah.
So what a thing to say.
Yeah.
Where Alejandro Kirk is now being relied on for his defense. Does that speak to, you think, the Blue Jays just deprioritizing the importance of defense on their roster and just like prioritizing getting the left-handed power off the bench and going bat first all over the place? Or do you think that speaks to the Blue Jays' faith in the improvements that Alejandro Kirk has made defensively and their increased trust in him at a very young age, still at the big league level, being able to game call and receive and block and do all the things that a big league catcher needs to do to keep runs off the board?
Probably some of both. Really, I think that with Kirk's development, he's developed familiarity with the pitchers. He's certainly worked hard. He wants to catch, as he told us on ATL, I guess it was last week. So there's some development there, and at the same time, this is a team that needs to prioritize offense. Kirk's a great bat. You want him in the lineup, and this is a way to do that. It also reflects faith, I think, in Danny Jansen and his ability to really shoulder a big load. And it's also not a coincidence that this would happen at a time that Gabriel Moreno is so close to the majors, because, if Kirk is in this role as the club's number 2 defensive catcher for 4 months, that's okay. And then if Moreno's up at the end of the season, or even if it's 1 year that Kirk is that secondary defensive catcher, you can live with it. And then long term, you have probably Moreno as your number 1 with Jansen as a 1A, or, you see how that plays out. But certainly Moreno has the chance to put himself really prominently in that mix.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see how the playing time plays out, because I assume Alejandro Kirk's still going to get some DH at bats. Like, I don't think Alejandro Kirk's best utility on this team is sitting on the bench and not being in this lineup hitting. So Danny Jansen's going to be catching Hyunjin Ryu. I imagine he's going to be catching Jose Barrios on opening day. Kind of talked to Charlie about this a couple times when I was down there, and he was saying, yeah, we're not really looking to match Kirk up with anybody in particular like we did last year with Robbie Ray. We'll see. Sometimes things that are said in spring training don't always come true in the regular season. So maybe Kirk ends up catching every Manoah outing, or maybe Kevin Gausman, who's again a 2-pitch guy, like pretty straightforward game plan. Like, Kirk working with Ray and, a 2-pitch approach worked pretty well last year. I wonder if they try to match him up with Gausman again this year. But I mean, what do you think the disparity there is for Kirk between DH playing time, who he's catching in the rotation, and then like obviously that will impact Danny Jansen's playing time as well. Like it's sneakily become one of the more intriguing things for me this season, is just how the sort of the plate appearances and the playing time is going to be divvied up behind the plate, and then DH at bats as well for Kirk.
Yeah, I guess to figure that out, I would probably start with catcher and think, okay, how many games do you want Jansen catching? And he wants to catch 120. He's caught 107 before. Like, that's his career high. If I'm the Jays, I probably want around 110, about 2/3 of the games. And then, so that leaves, let's say Collins is an occasional catcher as well. But let's say most of those other ones go to Kirk. So let's say Kirk catches 50 games. Then I'm probably thinking that he can DH for another 80. Like, I think he can DH half the team's games. So that gets him into 130 games as a starter. Give him some rest days in there. He's not a guy who's, if he's a catcher who is built the way he is, he's probably not playing 162. So you get 130, 140 from him. You're happy. He's going to hit. So I think he's going to earn those at-bats. He always has hit. And I think that, if you get 130 total from Kirk, that leaves 80 games at DH for other guys. That's kind of how I see it at this point.
Yeah, I want Kirk's bat in the lineup as often as possible is something that I'm looking to prioritize. And then the other thing is, like, look, Gabriel Moreno goes to Buffalo and looks like he did in 2021 and carries over the results he had in New Hampshire to Buffalo. That guy's a big leaguer by summer. And so there's another layer to this. Like, there's another wrinkle, and obviously you gain the option with Collins, so then you can just option Collins down, and now you got Collins and Kellen Deglan catching at Buffalo. You got at least some sort of veteran minor leaguer like depth there in case you run into injury issues. And watch, it's going to be April 25th, and like both Jansen and Kirk will be on the IL, and this will all be what were we even talking about? But like, the Moreno thing will be interesting as well. If that guy's ready in June or July, Jansen's healthy and playing, Kirk's performing, I mean, all of a sudden you've got a whole nother dilemma on your hands.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that would be a great problem. I think the Jays are hoping that is the way things unfold.
A good dilemma, yeah.
Well, it would be, yeah, for sure. But I mean, it's for now you've got 3 of them. I think, to make that defense for offense switch McGuire to Collins, I think it's interesting. On the surface of it, I'm more intrigued by Collins, and especially because he has the option, he has the offensive ability for a team that's already deep in catching to move a bit away from that, especially when your number one guy is very good defensively in Jansen. So I think it makes sense. One little wrinkle in this that I still kind of wonder about is how well the Jays are going to throw. Like, their catchers are going to work with the running game. Last year, with guys like Robbie Ray, that was a weakness. We'll see how the pitchers, work on that front. We'll see how Jansen's kind of improved. My suspicion is that other teams are going to run on the Blue Jays and try to steal. But that's something I'll be watching in the first few weeks of the year.
Oh, and that's something that'll be interesting to learn about Kevin Gausman and Yusei Kikuchi, just having not watched them as closely, like how well they hold on runners, because like a lot of catchers will tell you, like the pitcher's time to the plate has a lot to do with the math of stealing bases. So just like watching how those guys control the game and vary their times to the plate, and all the little intricacies that go into a pitcher holding a runner. Moreno has really strong pop times for what it's worth in the minors to this point. So he's been, really good at throwing out runners, so that'll be a plus. But yeah, it's something to watch with Kirk in particular this year, especially if he's going to be seeing more time behind the plate. Let's talk quickly about the bullpen, because that's where there's also some fluidity right now as spring training comes to a close. Little injuries picked up by Jordan Romano, Nate Pearson, and Ryan Baracki. What can you tell us about those three guys? Who's coming north? Who's likely to open the year on the IL? And what kind of opportunities is this creating?
Yeah, so good news for the Blue Jays that at least in the case of Romano, he's okay. So he was throwing a bullpen the other day, throwing really hard. The normal velocity that you'd see from him, the slider movement was there, so that's a good sign for the Jays. His command was off, and he went out and pitched in a minor league game afterwards. Wasn't locating well, so you wonder if he's going to get another chance to kind of zone in a little bit and find that command and find that release point. So that's one variable to watch, but he'll break with the team. So that's good news. Pearson will not. He's still sick. It's not COVID, but it's something. And so that's preventing him from doing the same thing and getting those reps in to build up his command. So he's on the sidelines, which is far from ideal. And then with Baracki, he's got a bit of a hamstring tightness right now, and it's not clear exactly where things are going to land there. But if I had to guess, I would say he probably opens on the injured list. But that is still up for discussion right now.
So those two open on the IL, and we're working with a 10-man bullpen. So we got Romano, Jimmy Garcia, Tim Meza, Adam Simber, Trevor Richards, David Phelps, Ross Stripling. Let's throw Julian Merriweather in there, right? So that's 8. So that leaves 2, and it could have been like a Baracki Pearson. Now you don't have those 2. I would say, and I've been talking about Taylor Saucedo all spring, that Taylor Saucedo has like on merit earned a job in this bullpen. Forget about like injury replacement. Like Taylor Saucedo has looked terrific this spring, has come in and thrown the ball really, really well against a high caliber of hitting and is flashing some really promising stuff. So I mean, he would be a pretty easy replacement for the out of options Ryan Baracki on this roster. If Baracki's starting on the IL, you move that lefty in there. But even just on pure merit, I think Taylor Saucedo belongs in this bullpen. And then number 10, is it just kind of like Trent Thornton by default? Yeah. Is there anybody else that you see who might factor in there?
I view it similarly. I think that Baracki or Saucedo, it could be one of those guys. And Saucedo really has had a good spring up until his last outing, but even then, afterwards Montoya was pretty high on how he had done. So I think that makes sense. And for the other spot, I think that there's a door open for Trent Thornton. He didn't pitch well Monday in his most recent spring outing, but I think the door is open there for him to potentially break with this team. And he's really hoping to, obviously, as all these guys are. It's a stressful time for them, so they're trying to find out if they've made the team or not, of course. But I think there's a chance. They optioned Castro. Not that they couldn't recall him, but they optioned Castro. So it seemingly Thornton has a chance here.
Well, I was thinking about Vasquez as well, and he also got optioned. And again, you could recall him, like you already used the options. So I think, probably Thornton for bulk reasons, I think, just because you can get a bit of an extended outing out of them, and you're going to want bulk guys around early in April as you take on this like crazy schedule and starters aren't that built up, and like crazy stuff happens in April baseball games too, as we all know, with weather and everything. So I think that just as an insurance policy, like Trent Thornton, just in the length that he can give you, probably comes north of this team. It'll be interesting to see the results. I know he's been kind of like working to pare down his arsenal, which is like a bit of an annual story with him, because there's been times, particularly when he was a starter, where he was like, flipping up like 7 pitches. It's great, right? Like they all move in different directions and they have all got like really strong spin rates. But I do wonder if the Blue Jays have, feel like he could benefit from just focusing on, maybe just 3 or 4 pitches, Trent. And he's not really in between anymore, where it's like, you're sort of a starter, you're sort of a reliever, like you're a swingman. Like I think he's just a reliever now. So he can pare that down and focus on those pitches and the sequences that he's going to use to get 9 hitters out, 1 trip through, not 2 or 3 trips through, where he has to think about different ways to set up and attack guys. So It'll be kind of interesting to see what kind of spots they find for him. But I think that just because of the length he gives you, Trent Thornton is the guy for that 10th spot in the bullpen.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. And I mean, to with the exception of Pearson and potentially Baraki, they've gotten through seemingly with one game to go. They've gotten through this spring with limited injuries, and that's a good place to be, both on the position player front and on the pitcher front. I would have guessed normally, you see injuries in spring. And so they've gotten through this condensed spring in a good spot. I know, Arden, I could be jinxing it right here, but they're emerging in a good spot.
Ben, there's tempting fate, and then there's saying what you just said here at 9:30 a.m. on the final day of spring. All right, yeah. That's a whole nother ball game that you've just entered us into. So I can only imagine what type of fate awaits the Blue Jays later today. But we'll be here to talk about it at some point for sure.